Hello and welcome to The Ring, Euronews' weekly debate show broadcasting from the European Parliament in Strasbourg today. I'm Stefan Grobe. On The Ring, members of the European Parliament go face to face on some of the biggest issues facing Europe. Today, we want to talk about European defense efforts in a fast-changing geopolitical environment. Luis Albertos has more.
Wars in Ukraine and Iran, economic insecurity, and questions about the future of NATO. Europe finds itself at a moment of profound uncertainty. That sense of vulnerability has triggered a historic shift in European defense policy. Countries that for decades reduced military budgets are now dramatically increasing defense spending. Europe is also trying to redefine its alliance, and many European leaders argue that Europe must become more strategically autonomous. At the same time, Europe fears being sidelined if the world increasingly becomes shaped by deals between the United States, China, and Russia. Can Europe successfully navigate this turbulent period? Can it emerge as a truly independent global power?
A lot to unpack here for our contenders, and here they are.
Lókaz Mاندل, an Austrian MEP from the centre-right European People's Party. He's a member of the Committees on Development, Legal Affairs and Civil Liberties, Justice and Home Affairs at the European Parliament. Regarding the EU's priorities at a time of growing global uncertainty and geopolitical turmoil, he said, "It's the economy, stupid. Let's put first things first." Mark Boutenga, a Belgian MEP from the Left Group. He's a member of the Committees on Foreign Affairs and Security and Defence at the European Parliament. He has criticized the EU's position on the global stage, arguing that the double standards of this Europe are not only a disgrace, they also allow the creation of a world of chaos and war. So be ashamed, because today, this Europe is not a force for good, but an accomplice to crime.
So let me welcome to the ring Lókaz Mاندel and Mark Boutenga. Good to see you. Great to have you here. The aim of the ring is to offer our viewers a glimpse at European Parliament debates, so you should feel right at home. Are you ready?
All right, we're ready. Thanks for having me.
Good. I want to start with something provocative, Mark Boutenga. Will more money, more defense money, actually make Europe safer, or are governments confusing spending with strategy?
Oh, I think definitely we don't have a strategy right now. So I think that's very impressive. Like, we put in a lot of money, right? Hundreds and hundreds of billions going to the defense sector, very often with little conditions, first of all. So we also see that at the same time you have these multinational companies that are now sending a lot more money to their shareholders. But I'm like, are we just sponsoring basically not just their profits, but even their dividends, their share buybacks? So that is one question. But secondly, what are our priorities? We see that people are buying, armored vehicles to be used in the west of Africa. We're seeing the F-35 fighter jets being bought by member states. And I'm like, what is this for? This is not for our defense. This is, if we, with all of the money and all the material we have, which is much more than what Russia has. We have many times more tanks, many times more fighter jets, many times more battleships than Russia has. We see Russia struggling. They were unable to even organize the parade in Moscow. Why are we not able to defend ourselves with the money we're already spending?
Yeah, let me take that question right to Lókaz Mاندel. Defense
like
strategy or not?
Oh, it's like everybody needs an insurance. If you're driving a car or doing whatever, you need insurance, and spending money for defense is an insurance for our security in the first place. And secondly, it's also for the very cause of Europe's prosperity, because the more we can innovate and produce on European soil, the better for jobs, for growth, and for Europe's economic future.
On this point, connecting Europe stronger, I mean, it's not like Europe doesn't have armies, it doesn't have had armies or defense spending before. Isn't the problem really inefficiency and fragmentation in Europe when we talk about military?
Well, I remember the European Commission, the previous one, the one of Jean-Claude Juncker, saying if we work together better at European level, we can save up to 100 billion euros on defense spending. I'm like, that's marvelous. Let's do that, right? And now you see, no, we work together better, but we also need to spend hundreds of billions more while we're already outspending vast amount of countries in the world. Most countries in the world spend a lot less than European countries do. We need to really be aware of that.
So there is no underfunding?
Oh, there's absolutely no underfunding. There might be a very bad use of some of the funds. This is something else. We've seen it at European level as well. You know, until very recently, drones were not a priority, not a top priority of the European defense spending. Then suddenly it became everything. You know, drones were everything we needed, the alpha, the omega. And now we're again, yeah, maybe it's not drones that are the main priority. So this is what I was saying. There's no real strategy, but there is an idea of saying Europe, you know, should be a main player globally. This is not about defense. This is about Europe being able to project power in the rest of the world, you know, in Africa, in the Middle East. Not defense, attack.
Do you agree?
We have big underfunding. We have had it for many decades in Europe. We have to invest in drones. I really want to address these conspiracy theories that are there as if it would not be for our defense, but for a different cause. It's for our defense. Europe is the very entity on this planet that's planning military matters in the very field of defense, not in the field of attack. And drones are obviously what's really needed in today's warfare. And if we are well equipped in the field of drones, if we have innovation also in the drones field and also production on European soil for jobs and prosperity, then we have a smaller probability that we will be attacked, because we will be more secure if we are able to defend ourselves. And this is the whole philosophy of defense. So our security is at stake. And I think conspiracy theories are rather harming our European unity and our European defense capability.
First of all, I don't think the massive increase is justified. Let's say this first. Secondly, I think it actually will weaken Europe on the long term as well, because contrary to what you're saying, it is not a good idea for our industry. You know, we have, you speak about jobs. Basically, the defense industry yields less jobs for money invested than other sectors do. You will not save the steel industry with militarization. You know, producing 1,000 tanks, it's about 3 days of production of a steel factory. So you can see that you're actually weakening also. There's a negative multiplier effect that might be applied to other industries. So you're weakening structurally the industrial base of Europe by saying we put more defense, but we will lose other sectors. Look at the automobile sector. And secondly, indeed, what is the threat that justifies, you know, this massive? Why, for example, if I hear the German chancellor, right, saying, I want to have the biggest army in Europe. Why do you want the biggest army in Europe? Is that your threat assessment? That the problem is you don't have the biggest army in Europe? We need to be very clear. There are threats, you know, and one of the threats is the arms race. One of the threats is nuclear war. Yeah. Let's be very clear. This is very clear. How do you deal with that? During the Cold War, we knew disarmament, transparency, limitations on arms control systems. All of these things we knew during the Cold War with the Soviet Union that was vastly more powerful and vastly more ideological than Putin or Putin's Russia will ever be.
Okay. Do you hear this?
In the Cold War, freedom won against dictatorship. And this was, of course, due to deterrence. And deterrence is what is needed. Deterrence will also save us. And deterrence is only possible if we can take care of ourselves. And the security sector and industries is not isolated from other sectors. We have to understand Europe, and I really care for Europe's prosperity, for jobs on our continent, and for the future of the generations ahead. Europe became a continent of consumption. We have been consuming over decades innovation from America, production from China and other parts of Asia, also innovation from China in the meantime. So we need innovation on European soil. We also need production on European soil. And when you talk about the automotive sector, there are not many sectors as much connected to the security sector as this one. So security and economy has to be taken serious. That's why I'm also saying let's put first things first. This must be the priority.
But I guess the threat assessment is different in the Baltics and in Portugal, right? So I'm coming back to Putin here. Shall we take him seriously? Shall we fear him? Is this whole build-up a response to Russian assertiveness and aggression?
I think we invoke the Russian aggression in Ukraine to justify programs that existed before. Let's not forget that, for example, the European Defence Fund was started before the current war in Ukraine. So there is, of course,
you know, I mean, the Defence Fund was so important for Europe to be started ahead of the Russian attack, but the quantity is so important, the connection is so important.
When we see, let me
not underestimate
let me get back. First of all, with these things, we're putting a lot of money, extra money, by saying Russia is going. There's a contradiction in European mainstream discourse, which is saying at the same time that Russia is extremely weak, is losing in Ukraine, and we might be able to free Ukraine from Russian occupation militarily. And then you have these images of the Red Square in Moscow where there's no parade. And on the other hand, the fact that Putin would be able to conquer the whole of Europe. These are two things that are obviously incompatible right now at the same moment.
But we don't want to find out.
What we don't want to find out is right now what, for example, a desperate Russia would do, right?
Could it be more desperate than it already is?
Sorry?
I mean, do you see any reliability or predictability in Putin's regime? There is already total desperation, so we have to be able to defend ourselves. I agree with the Commission's president who has stated we have to keep our hand reached out to the other Russia. I'm absolutely aware of that after Putin's regime, we have to give Russia the chance to become a democratic rule of law state like other Eastern European countries.
We need to do diplomacy right now, and this is the disaster of this European Union. We have forgotten what diplomacy is. Talk to other people. And diplomacy doesn't mean going having a drink with a friend. Diplomacy is talking to the opponent, to the adversary, to the enemy. This is to de-escalate and to limit conflict. And most countries in the world have tried this, and the European Union has refused. Now I see Angela Merkel, who got the Order of Merit. I see Alexander Stubb saying we need to do that.
Right, with a lot of names floating around. We'll come back to this later, but I want to stop you here as we're just getting warmed up, as you can see. Now it's time for our viewers to get a real flavor of the European Parliament chamber, where members ask each other questions. And sometimes it can get heated. So let's get started. Lookas Mantl, I'm going to ask you to ask the first question to Mark.
Well, Mark Boutenga, as a colleague in the European Parliament, how can we make sure that we establish more freedom for the Europeans to the inside and more strength to the outside? This is the overall issue of our time. I would say Europe needs more strength for its civilization, for its reliability, the diplomatic approach that you obviously do not see from the European side, while Europe is the strongest diplomatic power given the geopolitical situation today. So how can we create more strength to the outside, and how can we establish more freedom to the inside for our citizens?
I think that's a very interesting question coming from the center-right, who's governing in many governments in Europe, and who's basically limiting the right to protest, who's limiting the right to strike, who's limiting basically fundamental freedoms of Europeans. And so I would say, first thing, please tell the governments of your political group, of your political party, to stop limiting the fundamental freedoms of Europeans. And secondly, towards the outside, we need, I think, to rebuild European credibility. And how do we do that? We do that by stopping the double standards, by no longer saying international law is important for us in Ukraine, but in Palestine we don't care. International law is important when Russia or Putin violates it, but we don't care when Trump violates international law. Because if you have these double standards, never ever will other countries take you seriously, and never ever will you be a decent player on the international scale.
Okay, on this, I think you want to follow up.
I mean, there is so much to be said. I think it was now the fourth or fifth conspiracy theory from Mr. Boutenga in today's talk about freedom being limited in Europe. There is no part on this planet, no continent, no country where freedom is so much established and so much defended and strong as it is in Europe. Obviously, also that we have this debate today, also that extremists have all democratic rights in parliaments in Europe, including the very European Parliament. All of this is about freedom. And then mixing things up doesn't make it better. Of course, when international law is violated, Europe is the strongest voice speaking about that. Europe stood strong against Trump's attempt, for example, when it comes to Greenland, and we succeeded in that area. Mm-hmm. Europe stood strong when it was not clear whether the tariffs will go that way or the other way from Trump's side. He put us in a limbo again, but we didn't follow this pathway of a limbo. We didn't enter this political battlefield of Trump. We stood strong, and we managed to succeed more when it comes to the geopolitical tensions given than other parts of the world. But of course, we need more strength to the outside, especially in that field you are doubting, in the field of our own security, right, and Mark, being able to take care of it.
Mark, you want to react? And then your question to Lookas Mantl.
Well, I think it's interesting because very often the EP UMP and central parties, when they don't have an answer, they say this is a conspiracy theory. What we see in many countries, like in Germany now, there's a debate even on saying we can't use the watermelon anymore as a political symbol because it would be anti-Semitic. This is, what we are seeing. We're seeing this also with action against trade unions in different countries. So we see that there's a democratic backsliding, which human rights organizations are pointing out in Europe. It's not some kind of left conspiracy to say that. But you don't want to see it because it's your governments doing it. Secondly, what I indeed want to ask now, and I think that's a thing, you say that Europe stands up for international law, and you quote Greenland. Europe didn't stand up for international law in Greenland. It stood up for its own territorial integrity. That is something very different. Because when we had to stand up for international law, the illegal war on Iran, you supported it yourself. When it is about denouncing the illegal occupation of Lebanon by Israel, you support it. When the International Court of Justice says that we should sanction Israel as third parties, we have a responsibility, you refuse it. So basically, when the Venezuelan president, whatever we think of him, is kidnapped illegally, and the world globally condemns this, saying this is just absolutely not how we deal with, with international relations, and this is a violation of the UN Charter, you support it. So this is the issue. These double standards, it's not Europe that has double standards, It is it is the governing coalition of Europe that has these double standards.
Look, who is dealing with international law, who is in the lead of preserving it and observing it as the United Nations. We had yesterday night in the European Parliament's plenary a debate on the United Nations necessary reform. United Nations have to be reformed for obvious reasons. And if you are telling now that the war on the Iranian regime was wrong, I say, yeah, it was amateurishly done by the United States, while the decapitation of the Mullah regime's leaders worked very well. But the war obviously was wrong because it didn't work out well. The Mullah regime is still in place. I've been sanctioned myself by the Mullah regime since 2023, so I know what I'm talking about when I say women are suppressed in Iran. Iran is threatening the whole world, not only the region, and of course to threaten our only partner country in the region, the only democracy, the only rule of law-based state in the region, Israel, is part of the conspiracy theories of your political side. And this is a sign of freedom in Europe that you can speak freely about that, even it's a very much in minority being opinion, but you're allowed to say that, and there's no many parts on earth where you can do that. And last point on Greenland, I mean, when international law is violated, it doesn't matter whether it's Europe's interest or ours interest. We care for international law. We even want to save international law during these geopolitical times of tensions, and that means that we have to reform the United Nations.
Okay, thank you for a great debate so far. We've heard your views. Now it's time to hear from a new voice. And for our quote of the week, I would like to bring in Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni. In a letter addressed to Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, she said this: "We cannot justify to our citizens that the EU allows financial flexibility to be used for security and defense purposes in the strictest sense, but not to protect families, workers and enterprises from a new energy crisis that threatens to severely impact the real economy." Your take on this, Mark?
Well, two things. First, she's walked back on that statement. Secondly, it's terribly hypocritical because the fact that we now have, again, these horrible austerity rules was approved by her government. So first, and this is fantastic, first the far right approves this, or the center right, whatever you want to call her, approves these rules, and then they say, it's not fair. So this is, pure populism. But what is true is that Europe today says there's no money for your hospitals, for your pensions, for your schools, but miraculously, we find hundreds of billions for the defense multinationals. This contradiction is real. And so, indeed, we do not need these austerity rules anymore. And once again, they've been imposed by the mainstream parties, including Giorgia Meloni's.
Okay, Lucas Mundell, your reaction?
Yeah, this is part of the extremist populist approach. I think also the consumers, viewers of this program should see that there's no contradiction between producing something on European soil instead from buying it from outside and having hospitals roads and schools and streets, because the one thing is connected with the other. If we have strong prosperity, if we have growth finally in Europe again, we will also be able to afford the social welfare states we have established, generations before us have established in Europe, and we will have schools and roads.
All right, we're going to continue the conversation, but now have to take a break here on The Ring. We'll be back with more after this. Stay with us. Welcome back to The Ring, Euronews' weekly debate show. I'm Stefan Grobe, and I'm joined by Lookas Mandel from the European People's Party from Austria and Mark Bottenga from the Left Group from Belgium. At this point, let's take a look at the transatlantic partnership regarding defense. Trump wants to weaken the NATO alliance and seems increasingly non-committal to common defense. But the military business is showing a different picture. So here are some numbers from the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute. According to that institute, 64% of European NATO weapons imports come from the United States. And European arms imports rose by more than 150% between 2020 and 24 compared to the previous period. US arms exports to Europe increased by more than 200% in the same period. So Europe is now the world's largest arms important region. Lookas Mandel, hearing these numbers, your comments.
We had a time of many good beginnings since the beginning of Putin-Russia's war, but spending is not everything. I've emphasized that before. It's about where to spend. It's about the connection between the armed forces of the member states and also the understanding of the various different threats. Now we see the situation that the United States are obviously willing to reduce their number of troops on European soil. I think that's not only a development due to the given current US administration under Trump. It was generally something that had to be expected over decades, and a mature Europe will anyway be able to take care of itself. But I do not want to have confrontation with other parts of the world. I want cooperation, but on the basis of European strength.
Okay. How can we be strategically independent by buying American weapons?
Oh, we cannot. Let's be very clear. If you buy, for example, I mentioned the F-35 fighter jets before. Making a little bit of a cartoon out of it, you could say that with one push of the button, Trump can deactivate them. So if it were to, I don't know, defend Greenland, they would be completely useless. We do need to think how you create this autonomy. This you can do in different ways. One of the ways I would suggest is to say we need to diversify partnerships. So this idea of we are locking ourselves up in this kind of submissive attitude towards Trump. We've seen it as well with the trade deal and the EU-US trade deal, where we accept to give tariff-free access to the European market for many, many goods from the US, but ourselves, you know, we see that we impose.
What do you mean by diversifying? Is it buying from Brazil or India? Or?
Yeah, for example. I mean, you have your own industry, obviously. You know, you produce what you want to produce.
We have to produce ourselves.
But secondly, but we produce ourselves. Let's not. I mean, because you said before that we do not produce anymore. First of all, this deindustrialization, which is true and which is real, is not a gift from God. This is a consequence of policies that have been waged on this continent by your group. So let's not pretend this comes from nowhere. Workers throughout Europe have seen their jobs disappear in industry because of the policies, the market-driven policies your group has imposed on this continent. So
I
yes,
agree
we need
with the point that Europe has its own responsibility here, but it clearly came from ideological left sources that we had this.
But you were the one governing it. This was a market approach. No, how can you say the left is responsible for it? But this makes no sense.
We have better majorities in the European Parliament.
I'm ready to have a debate of ideas. I'm ready to have a debate of ideas, but you cannot say that it has been the left pushing for liberalization, that it has been the left pushing for privatization, for the sellout of our industries. This is just not true. This is center-right policy. But this makes no sense. I mean, let's have an honest debate on ideas. Let's have an honest debate on ideas. It's been the center-right, sometimes with social democrats in the coalition, that has sold off our industry. industries and that has privatized, liberalized our markets, and this would create, I don't know what kind of El Dorado. The reality today is what? Deindustrialization and a lot of issues for European industry.
We need not less freedom, we need more freedom.
You have refused to invest sufficiently in public energy infrastructure, and today our industries are being chased away by the fact that the energy prices are too high. And still today you're sabotaging the cheapest energy that would be green energy, keeping us dependent on fossil fuels from I don't know what countries.
All right. We'll come back to this. And now it's the time to move on to our fifth and final round. And we want to do something different now. I'm going to ask you a set of questions, and you can only answer with a yes or no. Okay? Lookas, I'll start with you. Should there be a common European army?
On the long run, yes.
No, not now.
No. Okay. Can Europe realistically build credible military autonomy without duplicating NATO structures? It's a long debate.
I just want to say, yes, if that's the question, yes, we can. I think we should work on a common security architecture in Europe.
Okay.
No, we can't. We have to do it within NATO. We have to reform NATO, such as UN also. Of course, it will be within NATO because to have redundancies is the worst thing we can do with taxpayers' money and also with our security.
Okay. Will NATO outlive Donald Trump?
Absolutely.
I hope not.
You hope not?
Yes, I mean, I think NATO today, you know, NATO is something that comes from the Cold War. That had a sense at the time, the Warsaw Pact against NATO. Today, we need a common European security architecture. NATO is something from the past, and Donald Trump is the living illustration of this.
Interesting. And finally, was there anything over the last half hour that you think your opponent said that you can agree with?
I can't say that, only maybe that European economic trouble is also based on our own European responsibility from the past, but I wouldn't direct that to the very center of politics. It was the extremists who were stronger over decades. Now we have better majorities in European Parliament. Now we lift burdens from our businesses. So maybe we agree on that. And I'm very happy to be European, seeing that somebody from the far extremists, in that case to the left, there also ones to the right, are allowed to speak freely. And there are not many parts of the world where this is possible.
Any agreements with Lookas?
Well, definitely not with this part. I mean, the far right has never been stronger in this parliament than you say that normal parties are stronger. That's very weird. One point I think I agree on is the fact that the issue with, let's say, defense and security is not a matter of more money. It's a matter of more cooperation, you know. And this, I think, he said, but this kind of contradicts the position of saying we need more money for defense. But I agree on this part. We need more cooperation and more coordination.
Wonderful. And that final answer brings us to the end of this edition of The Ring. Thanks again to Mark Bottenga and Lookas Mundell for a lively conversation here from the European Parliament. Thanks to our audience at home. If you like, you can continue the conversation by sending us your comments to thering@euronews.com. We'd love to have your feedback. That's it for today. I'm Stefan Grobe. Take care and see you soon on Euronews.